What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. And today I'm joined by Fahd Alhattab. And Fahd is a leadership speaker and consultant. He is also an entrepreneur and a former top 20 under 20 in Canada. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So obviously, just based off that intro, the natural place to start would be the 20 under 20. Could you tell me about that? How did that come about?
Yeah, definitely. That does take me a few years back. So I guess the story, as it goes and as I tell it is, when I was graduating grade 8, I remember it very vividly because my principal had pulled me and my friend Mohammed aside, and she had, really, she was really proud of us. She pulled us aside during graduation. She kind of challenged us, and she said, I'd love for you guys to come back to this community and help out. And we went to school in Lower Town here in Ottawa. And for anyone that knows the Lower Town area, they probably also know that Lower Town has the highest density of low-income housing. It's the most amount of low-income housing. We grew up, family came to Canada in 1998. We grew up with very little, but we had the blessing of family. I'm one of six siblings, six kids, and my two parents. So we had that. We were very, very lucky. But it was a tough community, and so our principal was very proud of me and kind of the work that we were doing and just being involved in school and just being kind of good kids. Honestly, that's all we really were. And so she had pulled me and my friend aside. She had challenged us, and we never really did anything about it. In high school, we all do our 40 hours, right? I remember volunteering. I was, playing sports with the Boys and Girls Club. I was involved here and there. And I remember in grade 12, my friend Mohammed, same one, not another one, because we all have 20 friends named Mohammed. I can say that, it's in my family name, right? So he calls me back and he calls me and we're not in the same high school anymore. He says, "Hey, Fahd, I have this great idea." And I was like, what? He's like, "Fahd, I want to start a March break camp for the kids in Lower Town." And I was like, "You're crazy. You're out of your mind." And he's like, "No, we'll do a camp. We'll use the school. We'll do like camp games. We'll do sports games. During March break, the kids don't have anything else to do there. We grew up there, and there was nothing there for us. This would be an amazing opportunity. Don't you remember, our principal challenging us?" And I was like, "We don't even go to the same school anymore, man. What are you doing?" And we talked about it for a little while. I remember even saying to him, I'm like, Mo, which parent in their right mind is going to drop off their children to two 17-year-old brown guys? We struggled through whether this was going to be a good idea or not, and we actually ended up doing it. So we were in high school and in grade 12 there, and we got together a whole bunch of friends, called them, said, "I'll get you guys pizza. I need you guys to volunteer for your March break. Your March break's off. We're going to get a bunch of kids into the school, and we're gonna run this camp. We're going to have some field trips. We're going to do some stuff." So I think we raised $1,500 or something like that, and we did the camp, and with 20 kids showed up, and 20, and it was this fun thing, and we're like, "Yo, we actually did it. We actually ran a camp," and we had to get obviously all the paperwork and get the kids to sign all these waivers and all this stuff that we were figuring out on the go. It was wait, we didn't do a registration day. Our kid's gonna show up. Wait, we didn't figure this out. That really was pivotal, right? That was pivotal in, I think, both a skill set, a mindset, and in where my friends and I started to do work. I say a mindset because I think it made me realize oh shoot, if there's a problem in my community, I can do something about it. If there's something I don't like, if there's something that was an opportunity that was missing, or people that aren't getting what I think they deserve to get, if you do stuff, it can actually change. And I think we all hear that. I think we all hear "Oh, be the change you want to be, you want to see," and "Oh, do something about it." We all hear this stuff, and it goes in one ear out the other, and believe in yourself. And yeah, of course I believe in myself. This is our generation was heard all these things. But I think it's different when you act on it. And so that moment for me was big. And so we ran the camp that year, then the next year, and then in 5 years it was over $40,000 raised, over 250 families that were affected. But as we were doing that, we also realized we had this talented group of young people who were passionate about helping the community. So we started raising money for Children's Wish Foundation. We were raising money for the Boys and Girls Club. We were raising money for scholarships for students through the Spirit of the Capital Youth Awards. So we got involved in helping empower young people to create remarkable change. That was what we were doing, and we did it while we were in high school and while we were in university. And when I was 19, I had a great mentor, the late Max Keeping, who many people might know. He was the founder of Child and Youth Friendly Ottawa, an organization that I had started volunteering with when I was 16, and I still sit on the board with them today. And he had founded that organization. He pulled me aside, and I was working, and he said, "Fahd, I'd love to nominate you for this Top 20 Under 20 award." And I remember thinking, I'm like, "Max, that's very generous of you, but I'm just a little kid from Vanier. We didn't do anything special." He's like, "No, you're creating an impact on a lot of these families, a lot of these kids." And I was like, "Yeah, but the people who win these awards are making money. At 19, there's NBA players. So, at 19, I'm here running a camp for kids." He kind of convinced me and kind of pushed me to do it, and wrote nomination papers. And I remember getting a call from one of their judges and saying, "We love your story. We love the passion and the impact and how close it is to your own community and your own family." I think it was something really interesting that one of the judges said. He said, "You might not feel that it's huge," because I made those sentiments pretty clear, that you might not feel that it's that big or that big of an accomplishment. He said, "But it's about the distance of the travel." He said, "Your family came, immigrated to this country with very little, and you've shown that even with very little, you can still have an enormous impact." And I think that was big for me, being around those people, being celebrated, being shown that doing this kind of work is extremely important, and people recognize you for it. That was the story, and that led to many other things, because we didn't stop, and we raised over I think it was $130,000, no, 170 in 3 years. It was $170,000 for the Children's Wish Foundation. In 3 years of fundraisers, we took a Hunger Games model. So we created this fundraiser that essentially pitted businesses against each other. We had Rexall versus Shoppers, Rogers, we had all these restaurants against each other, and they would they're different districts, and nobody died, but but that's how we had it. Anyways, that's what we were doing, and that's it was about creating that impact and embracing the fact that we can have immense change in our communities that led to that award.
Mm-hmm. And did that lead to a lot of media opportunities, whether that be with 20 Under 20 specifically, or because you were a 20 Under 20 led to exterior media opportunities?
I don't think I realized directly. I don't know if it was media opportunities, but I remember that year I got an email from Free the Children, the Kielburger brothers who started We Day and Free the Children and all that. National We Day was happening here in Ottawa, and they emailed me and said, "Hey, we heard about your story and the camp that you started. We'd love for you to come speak at We Day." And I remember just being like, "Sorry, what?" Yeah. They're like, at first they're like, "Oh, it's a panel. We'll ask you a few questions back and forth." And I said, "Okay, cool, no problem." And then 2 months go by, and they emailed me back. They had emailed me really in advance. They emailed me and they said, "Okay, so all the other people on the panel canceled. So we still have you. We'd love for you to speak." And I was like, "So how many people are going to be there?" And they're like, "Well, there's 16,000 people." I was like, how much time do I have to speak?" They're like, "Oh, you have 2 minutes." And I was like, what am I going to say to 16,000 grade 8 and grade 9, kids in 2 minutes? It was a big moment for me in both my speaking career, in my leadership development career, and I think that came out of the Top 20 Under 20 and kind of allowed me to use that platform to elevate the message that I was bringing to young people.
Mm-hmm. So had you been speaking before that, or did the We Day thing kind of make you go, "I should probably get a couple of speeches under my belt first before I do that," or how did that come about?
So I've always, as my mom and dad would say, I've always been a natural speaker. I wouldn't shut up. I laugh. I tell my friends, my brother and his wife had funny wedding vows. Actually, they had really funny wedding vows. It was kind of a little cheeky. They were going back and forth, and she was like, "Oh, I love you more than I love coffee," and he was like, "I love you more than I love the Raptors." Kind of this stuff. And he ended, my older brother ended with, he's like, I love you more than Fahd loves talking. And she said, I can't top that. Like, that's it, so I've always been naturally a speaker, a little bit of a showman. I'd say grade 4 was the first public speech I ever had to do in class. And I did it about the invention of basketball with Dr. James Naismith. I remember, and then I was chosen as top of my class, and I had to present in front of all the other grade 4s, 5s, and 6s, and there was this competition, and that kind of really snowballed. And I was in the competition grade 5 and grade 6, and involved throughout. Always speaking. I was valedictorian in grade 8. I was on my student council giving speeches in high school, right? So I was like, speaking was a very integral skill, very much part of who I am and my natural talent. So that came to me, and that was already there. Two things happened. One thing happened before the top 20 under 20. One thing happened kind of after. Before it, I had given a few presentations to some of my old high school classes. So my teachers would, ask me to come back when I was in university and say, "Hey, can you come to talk to some of the grade 12s on like what university is like?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, we'll go in and we'll do a presentation, right?" And it was very natural for me. And I remember even actually in grade 12, one of my teachers said we were doing like a book review. She said, "Fahd, you have a gift. When you speak, people listen." And then she said, "But I know you didn't read the book." She's like, "But yet I still want to listen to you come up with these extravagant ideas." She's like, "They make sense, but I know you didn't read it because of certain details." And I remember laughing. And I realized that it was a skill set that helped me elevate everything I was doing, whether it was the fundraisers I was doing or the business projects that I took on or being part of student council. My ability to use speech, my ability to use my words, my storytelling can capture the emotion of an individual and can help them see the idea that I'm trying to get them to see. When at Top 20 Under 20, I met a young man by the name of Shane Feldman. And Shane Feldman is a pretty famous speaker today, and he's in Toronto, but speaks all across the world. He's done some phenomenal work. He's the founder of the Count Me In movement. And we were top 20 under 20 winners together. And he saw me speaking in the group and just how I was with the group. And he pulled over to me and said, "Have you ever considered speaking?" And I remember saying, I was like, "Man, like Olympians speak. Like, past presidents, prime ministers, astronauts. If I was an astronaut, then you go and speak." Like, I'm like, "What do you mean speak? Like, no one's going to pay me to go speak." And he said, "You'd be surprised." He's like, "This is what I do right now. I do it through an organization that I built called Count Me In, blah, blah." And he gave me this, his spiel and all that stuff. And he showed me some of the stuff that he did. And it made it real for me. He was talented. He was really good at what he did. But it made it real. I was like, "Oh, he's doing that? Like, that's a thing? Like, I can do that?" So it was a really mindset shift. Again, like this, like, really interesting. I thought only presidents spoke. You know what I mean? Like, you go on your tour after, or Magic Johnson after he finished being an NBA player. Like that just. So then after We Day, I got a call from one of my older brother's past teachers, and he said, "Hey, I got your phone number from your brother. I'd like for you to come to Nepean High School." He's teaching at Nepean High School, and he's like, "I'd like for you to come to Nepean High School to speak to our grade 12s. We have this legacy day, and I'd love for you to talk about what you did when you were in grade 12 and started that camp." I said, "Oh yeah, no problem. That'd be fun. What day? Yeah, we're gonna." And then he asked me a question. He's like, "So what's your rate?" And I remember laughing on the phone. He said, "What's funny?" I'm like, "My rate?" He's like, "Yeah. How much do you want to be paid? Like, what's your rate?" And I was like, "No." I was like, I don't actually get paid for this stuff. Like, I don't have a rate." And he laughed and he said, "Well," he's like, "we usually pay speakers, so I have a budget." He's like, "So go figure out what your rate is and come back to me." And I remember just being like shocked, like, "What? Like, really?" And I called Shane from Top 2020. I was like, "Hey, so I got this booking. I got this teacher who wants me to speak." And he said, and he was like, "Okay." He's like, "Well," he's like, "I charge this much, and you should ask him what his budget is and what are you comfortable with." And I'm like, "Man, pay for my gas and I'm good. Like, that's what I'm comfortable with." And he's like, "Well, no, you have to start valuing your speech." And we think, we grew up where $20 a week made a difference. $50 a week made the difference between having enough groceries at home or not. You grew up in a scarcity mentality. Some of those conversations can be very difficult, right? And I think some of the listeners on your podcast might have grown up in a scarcity mentality, in a low income situation where starting to charge people for money becomes very uncomfortable. Luckily, I always ask people, like, "What do you think I should charge?" And so I went back to the teacher and I said, "Hey, so honestly, I'm not sure. He said, I spoke to a couple other speakers. They told me what industry rates are. I'm like, but I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. What's your budget? And he took back to me and he said, the last time I hired a young speaker, I paid him $750. How would you like that? I was like, yeah, I'll take that, no problem. And that was, that was the first booking. It was one of the first paid bookings I ever had, right? And it was I think setting false expectations, because I've done it, and I've continued to do a ton of free speeches. I continue to do, especially when I do my work with high schools, speeches for $250, $200. A donation to a charity, especially when I was on the rise. The amount of free speeches that I gave, really made a big difference. And actually, funny story is I got a speaking coach pretty early on that I was lucky to have. I met him through volunteering. I was volunteering to do a video shoot, and I met and he was doing a workshop. His name's Steve Lowell. He's a speaking coach here in Ottawa. But I remember speaking to him and saying, hey, I'm interested in doing this. And he gave me an amazing rate to coach at an extremely low rate compared to what people actually paid, because he said he believed in some of the stuff I was doing. And I think that's really the message, is if you create value and you do good for your community, when you want coaches and you want to improve, people are out there to help you. People want to help good people. Good people want to help good people. And I think that's true.
Yeah, and you said those free speeches and those really discounted speeches helped you a lot. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Well, several reasons. You only get better at speaking by speaking. So it's not like, you can practice in a room for sure, but the energy of a crowd, the back and forth of a crowd, the ability to actually, when it's time to go, when your adrenaline is pumping and you're excited and all that, there's nothing like it being on stage or speaking in front of people. So it's hard to practice those emotions, the game day. And no one's gonna pay you to practice. So you got to go and do those free speeches. You got to go and just put yourself out there and take whatever you can, because you're practicing. Otherwise, you're practicing on their dime. And you don't want to be practicing on their dime, because you're not going to feel comfortable about it. You're not going to feel like I'm doing the right thing here because I'm practicing on someone paying me. The pressure's too high. I get paid. Sometimes right now, I'll do a gig where they'll fly me out. They'll pay. The high schools pay a different amount, but the corporations pay a higher amount, and that's understood. High schools and universities that I work with are nonprofits and students, and it's more work that I'm passionate about. But my leadership development that I work with corporations, they'll pay $7,500 for a keynote talk. Someone for an hour and a half is paying you $7,500. There's a lot of pressure on that, There's pressure to perform, and then people say, "Oh, that's so sweet. They're paying you that." I'm like, yeah, but now you got to deliver $7,500 worth of value in an hour and a half. Good luck. That is hard. That is harder than, give me 2 weeks to deliver $7,500 worth of value. Well, yeah, 2 weeks. I could take you through every module on leadership and development and team dynamics, and actually do one-on-one coaching with your team, and that I'm comfortable with. But now I've got to deliver both an emotional and engaging story that leaves with practical insights that can impact your work at a return on investment of higher than what you paid me. There's a challenge, right? And speaking is this art form, and it's not directly in marketing and social media, where you can track the analytics of okay, we did this Facebook ads campaign and it resulted in this. There's no, that, so really having that. So anyway, so doing the free speeches, 1, was great to build your own content, your own practice. 2, get your name out there. Go and deliver free content to get as many under, because if you are great, the only way you know you're a good speaker is not the praise that you get after a speech, because everyone always praises you. The people always oh, great speech. Oh man, that was fantastic. Thanks for coming out. Is if you get a referral. If your business starts getting referrals, that's how you know you're a good speaker. It's the only genuine indicator. Otherwise, people know how scary public speaking is. I don't know if the statistic is actually true that public speaking is the most feared thing in the world. I don't know if that's fake news or. I've heard it. We've all heard it, but for some reason I doubt it. There's definitely scarier things, but that's just me. That's me, right? But people won't give you that. So 1, you want referrals. You want your name to get out there, right? Tons of my speaking bookings have come from. There's nothing more than I heard him speak and he was great. That one line, hearing it from someone else, is better than your website, your video, and all the marketing stuff that you have that's it. The trust of another individual. I heard him speak. He was great. I've booked so much on those words, right? And then the other part was I would got to try new content. Whenever I'm practicing new content and new things, I love having a free audience, like an audience that I didn't have, that isn't paying me. I'll go and try new content. So if it's like mediocre and it's a 7 out of 10 instead of my 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 performance, it's okay. I'm not gonna feel bad about a 7 out of 10. I tried some new material, right? Tried to practice some stuff. But I've been at this for 6 years, speaking for 6 years, and only is it now, something that I do full time. Like, it's been something that I've done on the side for a very long time. It's something that doesn't necessarily need to take you as long as it did for me, because I was, still working other jobs. I was still working as an entrepreneur. I was doing all these other things. But I've only recently started to take it that seriously. A lot of people keep it as a side thing for life because they enjoy it and they love it, but they don't want it to be their full-time thing. And to me, I'm a speaker, but I'm also a trainer and a consultant, so it's part of my larger business model. Right?
So as someone that's been doing it for 6 years now, what would your advice be to someone that wants to get into this, and how do they land that first speaking role? Because just personally, speaking is something that I'm drawn to. I used to do it a lot in college, and I've stopped doing it, but it's something I would like to get back into. And in that exact scenario, you said maybe not as a full-time thing, but as something I can do on the side. What's the best way to get that first speech?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, there's two types of people. There's people who need pressure to get work done, and then there's people who can get work done. I need pressure to get work done. So I get a booking and then I create the keynote, I know the keynote's outline but I have to get the booking, so then I'm like, now I got to actually create this talk and it's got to be amazing. What I would suggest is one of those two routes. One, I would, just spend some time, and if you had an hour talk, what would you talk about? What genuine value can you provide that is different than someone else's? Now, you might have pieces in there that are well-known knowledge to the people in your industry. But remember that, when you're speaking, you're also speaking to people who may never have heard of this stuff, right? So it is unique, right? So when I'm speaking to high school students and I'm talking about their personal development leadership journey, right? Sometimes I'm talking very basic things, which is at the first level of student leadership, because it's about making choices. It's about understanding that life is just a series of choices. That's all it is. It's one choice after another. If you can start looking at life as 100% of things as my choice, then your perspective changes. You take 100% responsibility, which is something that if you've ever been in a personal development kind of world, that's like rule number one. Everyone knows it. And everyone's like, why would I ever say that? Everyone knows it. Well, they don't, right? And so one, I would recognize that, and I would start building out your kind of 1 hour workshop, 1 hour talk. What value can I provide? And then the personal perspective on that, right? So it's about yes, it's about providing content, and sometimes, we say there's no such thing as really new content because it's all out there, but it's providing knowledge with a unique personal story and then a unique perspective. Your perspective, right? Like my perspective as Fahad, as a student leader, right? So I was grade 8 president, I was grade 12 president, and I was president of my student union at Carleton. So I have a unique perspective as a student leader who's literally been all levels of student leadership, right? At the age of 21, having to lead a team of 150 staff and $8 million at a student union. Now, I provide that perspective onto management, which is unique to anyone else's perspective, and suddenly that, coupled with existing knowledge, creates an aha moment for someone in your crowd, right? So create that 1 hour content. What does that look like? What can you provide? What are the facts and knowledge? What are the personal stories that you can share? And what are the deep perspective insights that only you can share? And then I would take that, I would create it into a short description, a two or three sentence description, and I would shop it around to 10 to 15 different possible clients. So there's conferences happening all the time. There are schools all the time looking for speakers. There are associations that are looking for speakers for their memberships. So like the Kiwanis or Rotary clubs who are there. There's in Ottawa, I think 1,600 charities and associations like that. And that alone, they don't have budgets to pay for speakers, but you can go and for free. Like, hey, I'll do a workshop on marketing and how to elevate your brand as a way to increase engagement with your donors for charities. Boom, and just send it out. Hey, I'll come in and do this for free. right? Or I come in and do this for $50, right? Sometimes even just asking for $50 creates a commitment, right? Whatever it is, right? And then that gets you the door. That just gets you doing them, right? And then the first time you do it for free, and they love it. And they're like, hey, can we recommend you to like one of our friends? Yeah, no problem. You recommend, you do a couple, and then you start asking for a little bit of money. Then you start engaging. Then they ask you to come back. Hey, we love what you did. Do you have any consulting? Can you work with us on a project? Now there's opportunity. Now there's so a lot of people use speaking as a way to generate further business. There are a lot of people who use speaking to generate further business, and then there are people who are professional speakers. Professional speakers are a little more rare. That they're really more polished. They've got the talent of speaking and engaging has gotten them a lot higher. But even them, they likely have training and consulting programs that subsidize, add to the income, or a couple books and so on and so forth, right? You don't need a book to start speaking, and you don't need a online training program and a full website. One, just develop a 1 hour of content and shop it out there to the people. And then as you start doing those shots, get a camera and film yourself 3, 4, 5 times. Suddenly you have a promo video, right? Suddenly you create a promo. Now you slice that video up and you put it on a Squarespace page that you made overnight that has only one thing on that Squarespace page, which is the description of the workshop, the results they get from the workshop that you've already outlined, and a video clip of you doing it, and then the 5 logos of the 5 associations you just spoke with. Suddenly, you're a speaker, and you have a booking form. Now when you reach out to them, you say, hey, check out my link, right? You need that video. Now you check out my link. Now you're getting more bookings, right? So there is a process to it. There's a very systematic, scientific process to it that has been proven to work. The part that is key is the actual delivery of the delivery, your ability to have a phenomenal craft, and then 2, what they're paying for is not necessarily the speaking. They're paying for the thoughts. I think that speakers forget that speaking is a medium, right? But it's a medium to explore content, and so you have to constantly be coming up with new content. So what you're doing here with your podcast is phenomenal content, right? That content can be used and engage people who want you to come and speak, right? There's ways to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting is the way when you frame it as a workshop and not as a speech. Mm-hmm. And I think that really kind of just you've been talking about mindset shifts, shifted mine a little bit, because if you look at it as a workshop, I find it's less daunting than looking at it as just talking for an hour. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just cool because you're just working through the steps in the process, which I feel is much easier to talk about for an hour than just trying to figure out what to talk about for a full hour.
Yeah. No, totally, exactly. And I think if you can do workshops, then you can elevate to what you want as a speech. And I'd say most people, it's easier to get into do workshops than do speeches, because speeches are, all right, we've got a dinner gala and I need a 45-minute keynote to come in and kill it. Those are the big guys. That is more pressure. But come in, do a workshop. Here's the thing. You do 10 workshops, then suddenly you have some results from some of the clients. Now, if you need to do a speech, well, during your speech, you simply talk about the results of the clients that you already helped. Right? You hear these speakers and they're like, so one time I was with IBM and we were working on this thing, and they're telling stories about what? Their workshops, right? They're consulting. And so your own workshops feed your content for your speeches, because now there is no breakout time, and it's just full hour. And you'd be surprised, right? And there's different, you want to tell a story, then you want to provide some facts, then you want to provide some tips, then you want to pull them back to a story, emotional, right? And they just build these segments, and then you want to create a little model of how they implement it, and suddenly you're in an hour. I think if you have a genuine good story, it's about I say speaking is about a transfer of energy, transfer of emotion, right? First and foremost, that is what people want. That's why they hire speakers. They want to feel good. Think about the best speech you've ever had, ever listened to, right? You probably can't remember 5% of the content, but you're man, I left and I felt good. I attended a Tony Robbins seminar, we're jumping around and super excited. It just makes you feel phenomenal. Some good content. I can't tell you off the top of my head, exactly what it was. Maybe a few words here or there, but the idea was that it felt really good, and that it it connected at that level. And that's what speakers need to remember. That's what people need to remember, is that how do you connect with your audience? How do you do that?
Mm-hmm. And you talked about how you've recently kind of gone more all in on the speaking. Mm-hmm. And then I noticed when I was just kind of doing some prep work and some research, probably over the last 6 months, you've
mm-hmm.
really gone a lot harder
mm-hmm.
at content online, on
yes.
social. Mm-hmm. I don't know if your branding kind of came together in the last 6 months, but you have a polished brand across all platforms. So what was the reasoning behind doing that?
So, I mean, great question. Great question. So I've been doing this for a little while. I've had a website, I've had branding, I've been doing that. And, I used to do a good amount of outbound. So I'll send out a bunch of emails to schools, a bunch of emails to corporations. Hey, I do this speaking. Hey, I do that. I do this. And, maybe a year ago, I had someone who I knew within my network hire a different leadership speaker who cost more than me. And when I asked them, I was like, because I was interested, I was like, okay. I was like, hey, why'd you hire them? And they're like, oh, they gave me all the reasons and stuff like that. And I was like, do you know, I do that work? And that was someone I've done a lot of work for. They're like, no, I didn't know you did. I didn't know you did speaking, leadership speaking. I thought you just did the consulting stuff. I was like, oh, interesting, right? I realized people in my own network weren't that aware of what I was doing. I was like, oh, I'm losing clients from my own network, and my own network isn't even coming directly to me. And he said, yeah, if I knew you were doing it, for sure you're my first choice. He's like, I'm not even saying that because it's nice. He's like, you have better material. I've seen some of your material. And he's like, yeah, I don't know, you weren't top of mind. And so that was very aha moment for me of okay, my brand, my personal brand. And people say, what is your brand? Okay, people, oh, it's my logo, it's my colors. No. Brand is what other people say about you. That's what your brand is, right? And so the question is, what are other people saying about Fahd? And, good things. And it was always oh yeah, he does some speaking, he does some consulting. It was a little bit disjointed, right? So I realized that, and that was kind of a big aha moment for me. And then I've been doing, so I believe in, as a trainer, I believe in training, obviously. And I also believe as a trainer, you not only do people need training, you need constant training. And so ever since I've left university, I've spent at least $8,000 on training every single year. I've continued to pay the price of tuition to learn every single year. Because I believe the moment you stop, you're going to fall behind. The moment you stop, not even fall behind, you're just not going to grow. And if we're not growing, especially as entrepreneurs or business people, or as humans, when people aren't growing, that's when they start to get unhappy. That's when they start to be unhappy with their job or unhappy with their family or their relationships, because they're not growing anymore. So I believe that's extremely important. So I've been investing this money in growing and coaches and training programs and conferences. And at one of the conferences, before I even went to one of these conferences, I read a Seth Godin blog. And love Seth Godin as a writer. It's phenomenal. And I subscribe to his blog. He does these short blogs once a day. And he put out a challenge. He said, I started this blog X amount of years ago where I decided to start writing one blog a day, short, 100, 200 words, put out some thoughts on marketing, on entrepreneurship, all that stuff. And he said, he named a whole bunch of other people that have daily blogs. And he said, I challenge you as thought leaders to be able to do this, because if you can come up with a unique thought every single day for 365 days, then you genuinely belong in your lane. You genuinely belong in this. And and if you can't, then it's going to force you to start researching and learning more in your own lane, so that you're not repeating the same stuff, but you're developing new content. And I was in a bit of a tough spot with my business. I had some stuff going really well in consulting, but not stuff I wanted to continue doing. I was doing it for clients because they're bringing in money, but I wasn't sure I wanted to keep doing it. My youth speaking stuff was blowing up, so I'm doing a ton more high schools and universities, but I wanted to start doing more and more corporate stuff. So I'd been doing some corporate stuff, but it was a bit organic stuff that came in. It was maybe 10-15% of my business. The other 10-15% was consulting, and then the rest was my high schools and universities. And I was flying across the country doing those. And so I took on the challenge. I started writing on a daily basis. And I was so uncomfortable, I wouldn't post it online. I sent it to 3 or 4 people, 2 friends. I was like, hey, I'm going to start writing, and I'm just going to send it to you because I need a commitment. I need someone that's going to And one of my close friends, Orad, read it every single day religiously. Like, and he like would comment, would reply back and be like, hey, I like this thought, or hey, your grammar is off on this, hey, your sentence structure, hey, what about this thought? And I did it for about, and then I grew the list. I added 5 more people. I had 5 more people, and I got to about 30 people, 40 people. And I remember going to the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers Conference, and it was a marketing workshop. And these are some really good speakers, some like people who are in the industry, some pretty top ones. And the guy at the workshop said, how many of you put out content in the last 6? So everybody stand up, like sit down if you haven't put out new content in the last 6 months. About half the room sat down. I was up because I was like writing this daily blog. I hadn't sent it out. I did some social media stuff, but I was like, I'm gonna use that daily blog as my point of reference because I've been doing it. Half the room sat down, and it was like, whoa. They said, how many of you in the last month? Next half of the room sat down. Interesting. And he said, how many of you in the last week? And maybe 5 people in a room of like 100 were left standing, and I was one of them. And he said, how many of you while you were at the CAPS convention? Okay? And I had written a blog the night before, and I was standing up, and one other person was standing up. And he said, the speaker was like, to genuinely be ahead of this game as a speaker and as somebody who's putting themselves as thought leaders, you need to constantly create content. He said, it doesn't have to be every day. Let's congratulate these 2 that are up here. He said, but if you're not doing it on a weekly basis, you're falling behind. And I realized here was an opportunity for me to take this. I had a skill set for marketing, and I realized I had done this in all my other entrepreneurial endeavors. I was the go-to marketing guy. I was always able to get PR attention because I had these wild ideas. And even when I was president of my student union, we got attention for some ridiculous projects that people made fun of us for. I was always great at that. And I was like, okay, I'm not maximizing my biggest skill set in my own business because I am focused on trying to sell it. But instead, if I create an inbound by creating content and focusing on that, if I look around the room, like that would be my main advantage. What set me apart that day from every other speaker in the room was that I was constantly creating content. And if I just doubled down on that and took it to the next level by posting it as a blog, by putting it on social media, by creating videos, this would be huge. I've done that consistently for the last maybe 4 months. Every day, there's a blog every day, and there's 1 or 2, there's posts on all social media 1 or 2 times every day also. Obviously some of it is automated, scheduled. We have systems. I have a part-time staff that helps me with this. We've expanded the team to make sure. But the leads that have come in are far greater than anything that I've ever sent out a sales email for. Because they've seen my stuff, they've interacted with my content, they liked my blog, they liked what I had to say. And then on the phone, they were already sold. They were already like, yeah, we want you to come in. I wasn't doing any selling. They were just trying to figure out when was the right time to make it happen. And that was a huge shift of like, okay, this is how I create a unique lane in this area. Now, obviously, as I get higher and higher in the speaking industry and the training industry, the top guys are posting and are creating content. But at my level where I am in my competition, this has been a huge value add and a very unique proposition that's setting me apart.
Mm-hmm. So talk to me about creating the content then. When do you come up with your ideas? Do you try to bulk shoot? How do you go about it? Because I know you also do, I'm assuming, we talked beforehand, you follow Gary Vaynerchuk. You try and do some of his model where you make one longer form piece of content and repurpose it and contextualize it for different platforms.
Correct.
Is that kind of how you think
So I do
about
2
it?
things. So one, I write a daily blog. Mm-hmm. So those are not written every day. Sometimes when I started, I was writing it every day. Now I bulk write because I can write. I'm a shitty writer. That's how I've always seen myself. Why? Because my sister's a phenomenal writer, and my best friend is a phenomenal writer. He's a lawyer. And my sister's a journalist student. So I always compared my stuff to people who were phenomenal writers. So I've always thought I was pretty bad. I've gotten a ton better, so much better at writing. Now, am I gonna be suddenly an author? And probably not. Maybe become an author. I still need an editor and a publisher, and I still have grammar mistakes. I bought a subscription to Grammarly to make sure, it checks premium stuff to make sure it checks all my stuff. But in the process of writing, I got so much better. Now I sit down, I do a 2.5 hour session, I can pump out 5 good, strong blogs. Now, they're short, they're 200 words, maybe 250, sometimes 300, right? But they're an idea, they're a story, they're a statistic that I talk about, they're a concept in leadership. So I have a bit of a framework of, here's 26 themes of leadership and team development communication that I can pull from. From these 26 themes, I can do a story, or I can do a statistic, I can do a quote, and then I kind of match theme, match module of style, take that, write a little blog. Now, that's if I haven't had an inspiration that day, right? That's when I'm trying to be more systematic, and sometimes you need that because you don't have the inspiration that day. And sometimes I just finished a training and something in the crowd happened really well, or like with someone, and I'm like, oh, this was such a good pull, and I write about my experience with them, right? So I write 5 blogs a week. So I don't do daily, I do week work days, right? So five blogs a week. So though that is part of my long form content, and then I bulk shoot 4 videos on like one Saturday. I'll use like a whole Saturday, and we'll do that. But I also vlog some of the corporate retreats I do. So, we'll do sometimes a corporate retreat once a month, and so I'll bring my videographer along and be like, okay, we're just gonna vlog the whole day, right? So that's an additional video. So we'll vlog that, we'll have some good content, but then I also shoot, 4 videos once a month on a Saturday, and there'll be like stories that came out of my blog. So sometimes I'll write, and a certain blog will get really, really good traction, and people really resonate with it. And then I'll take that, expand it, and actually speak it, right? And so sometimes people who read it will not, so people who view it will not have read it, and vice versa, right? To kind of give them both perspectives. But speaking it gives it life sometimes, right? And sometimes it's the exact story with a little more meat, and sometimes it's just a completely different spin on that same exact idea. And so that's really my content, is those blogs weekly, and a weekly video, and 5 weekly blogs. And from there, those 5 blogs are made into, graphics or pictures for social media, for tweets and LinkedIn posts and so on and so forth, and everything else is disseminated from there.
Mm-hmm. And so we're getting close to the end. We're over time here, and I apologize.
It's all good. No, it's all good. We're having good conversations. So.
You recently put out a post on something that I was also talking about. I was a guest on another podcast, and I was talking about this, and I get asked about this all the time, and you've been putting out a lot of content. So what is your best advice for people that are trying to figure out how to start?
I get asked this question a lot, and I'm gonna give you the simplest answer, and I'm gonna give you a little more details because some people sometimes find the simplest answer isn't enough. To begin, you just have to begin. It's like when you're standing in front of a cold swimming pool. There's no strategy on jumping in the water. You just jump in. There is no strategy in all of this stuff. Far too often, we want to strategize and categorize and analyze. Like, how do I best do this? I am telling you, you learn by doing it. By writing those first initial blogs, I learned how to write blogs. By just writing off the top of my head, I started seeing themes that came out. Started seeing, okay, sometimes I share a story, sometimes I'm sharing a quote. Here's different examples. You start to see, as humans, we naturally see patterns. It's part of how our brain has been able to create structures and why we've been able to create civilization. Humans see patterns. As you do your own work, you'll see patterns and you create these models. Don't take another course. As a trainer, don't take another online course. Don't read another book, and don't go watch someone else do it. Start doing it, and it's going to be shit, and it's not going to be great, but it's the process of doing it. And here's one of the greatest stories that I like to share about this. So David Bale shares this story in the book Art and Fear, and he talks about a ceramics teacher who wants to show his students why quality is better than quantity. And he wants to show that dichotomy. And so he gets his students, it's this high school student class, they're doing ceramics, and he splits the class in half. And he tells one half of the class, he said, you guys, your goal is to create the best pot ever. So this is the quality group, right? Doesn't tell them that. But your goal is to create the best. Your marks, you're going to be marked on the quality of your pot, how good it is. He goes to the second group and he says, you guys are going to be marked on the amount of pots you create. Not how good they are, but the amount. You want to create as many as possible. And he gave them about 45 minutes to an hour to do their thing. And then he got them to all line up their pots. And to his own surprise, he saw that the pots on the quantity side were better than the ones on the quality. And he was confused. It's like, what? And so he asked one of his students, he says, what happened? And one of his students says, well, sir, the first 3 pots I made were shit, but the 4th one and 5th one were pretty good. And he's going to judge the quality ones. He said, what happened with you guys? He said, well, I'm still trying to fix the first one. See, this is what happens to us. We get stuck on making the perfect blog post and the perfect Instagram post or the perfect first video, the perfect first podcast. And we want to strategize, figure out how, we want to know how we're going to get to 1 million subscribers on the first day that we start. It's just not how it works. You have to create, and through the process of creation, you get better. Your first pot, your second pot, your first blog post, your second blog post, your third blog. Just begin. If you want to do it, start doing it and start sharing it. Sharing it creates commitment. Like, there are days I don't want to blog. And I'm like, wait, but like, I made a commitment to blog every day, and I feel like there's audience, people. Like, I have friends who read the blog post every day. I missed a single day. I missed one day. I did. And I got a message. Hey, I didn't get your blog post this morning. What do you want? You don't think anyone's watching. You genuinely don't think anyone's watching or anyone's actually following. And maybe there aren't millions of people following. And I even say there's not even thousands of people following. Like on my mailing list, because it's a daily blog, I've had a lot of people unsubscribe because that's a daily email that they're getting. Some people are like, I don't want these emails. But if they're committed to reading it, I'm committed to delivering it. I only want people who want a daily message on leadership, because leadership is not something that happens. It's not a one act. It's not something that happens once a year. It's not something that happens once a month. Leadership is an everyday act. And unless you can read about it every day, you're not going to develop that skill set. So that's what I want on my list. But my list is under 100 people. It's not a huge list, but it's dedicated readers. It's people who engage with the content. And that's what I want on my list. Now, my social media, my Instagram has way more, my Facebook has way more. Like, that stuff builds because more people can see it and interact with it on their own. But just begin. Just start.
Mm-hmm. So out of all the content that you produce, your talks, your workshops, social media, what's the number one thing you want people to take away when they consume your content?
The number one thing I want them to take away is that we all have a responsibility to be leaders. It's no longer a privilege, no longer an opportunity. It's actually a responsibility, especially living in Ottawa, in a G7 country, in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. I don't think we recognize that. We all have a responsibility to be leaders at home, at work, in our communities, and not leaders once in a while, but leaders every single day. And if we make that mindset shift, how am I leading today? I think it changes the world.
I think that's a really good note to go out on. I really like that. I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks. Sorry for going overtime. I
know.
know.
That's perfect, man. That was so good. I want to give you the floor. Where can the people find you? Plug everything you got. If you have any talks coming up, everything you got.
Yeah, I mean, check me out on social media. Check me out on all these platforms. My name is Fahd, Fahd. I know that's sometimes tough to spell. And then my last name is Alhattab. But even if you just go Fahd Speaks, Fahd, and then Speaks, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff there on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, wherever it is. Check out my stuff. I'm always happy to interact, to interact online, all that. My trainings and my workshops are my trainings, my workshops, and my speeches are typically for clients only. So right now we don't have any public, super big public events. But hey, maybe that changes, maybe that grows. But if you have a team, if you have people you want to develop their team dynamics, you want to develop their leadership capacity, if you have an event happening and you're looking for a speaker to wow your crowd on community impact and leadership, and I'm happy to come help out. And especially if it's in Ottawa, then you know, I would say, like, if I can drive to it and still sleep in my own bed, then I'm happy to make it happen, you know? So.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you once again for coming on the podcast. And I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. Whether you've listened the entire way through or you've only listened to bits and pieces, I really appreciate you taking the time to check this out. If you could do me one big favor, guys, please go follow Fahd on Instagram. I'll make sure everything is linked in the show notes down below, whether you want to follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, check out his blog. It'll all be linked in the description. And if you'd like to follow me, you can find me at the Jacob Kelly on both Twitter and Instagram. And if you'd like to follow the podcast, it's at My Social Pod on Instagram and just My Social Life on YouTube. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.